I think it was exactly 1 year ago. You were here. I was interviewing Voss, who I think was starting, the new CEO of Novartis was starting maybe 1 week later officially. What was your impression of coming into the Startup Health Festival and meeting us for the first time?
So you're right, Unity. It was exactly a year ago. It was my day one on the job, pretty much.
Day one.
And I think, first of all, congrats as well for what you've put together. It's like we sort of knew coming in that there was a spirit that is incredible. You told me you had 2,500 people effectively attending this over the next few days. So we wanted to be a part of it when we saw that, when we sensed that. The energy was just incredible. This year, I didn't even take my badge to JP Morgan. I only came here pretty much, and then a set of meetings as well. So congrats for that.
Thank you. Well, we were back in the green room a year ago, and what instantly connected us to Novartis at Startup Health, and we care deeply about who we partner with for the entrepreneurs, was the vision that you all had to become a digital company, to really transform what you are doing. So I wonder, as the Chief Digital Officer, if you could talk about that transition, and maybe before we get there, you have such a unique background because you're coming from outside of healthcare into healthcare. So maybe we'll start there.
That's right. I'm still discovering pretty rapidly the healthcare space. When I started a year ago, I was in retail before for quite a while. At Amazon over 15 years ago, back in Seattle, when it was pretty much a little startup at the time, quite messy. And then competing against Amazon in different digital transformation, and also in the meantime, in between, having had my own business. So I loved retail to bits because there was something about it, the speed at which it moves, the action-reaction. You get incredibly close to your customers as well on a daily basis. But I have to say, there is something, I love this space as well. There is something about the purpose. Look at the 10 missions and the 10 moonshots that you're driving as well. There is the skill as well to do things that are just absolutely incredible. There's a lot to discover. And I love the fact that, and it's probably what attracted me as well to Novartis, is the fact that it was a blank canvas. There was really a mandate to say, there is an inflection point, something is going to happen. Look at how much tech, data, and science are starting to converge. How do we get in that space? What do we do on the research side? What do we do in terms of development? What do we do from a commercial point of view? How do we reinvent the model as well as part of that? So it's been a great first year. I think you
guys have been moving so quickly. I mean, you've made several investments in digital therapeutics companies like Pear, our partnership, of course. It just seems like you got the pace of what's going on has been rapid.
Yeah, I think so. I'd love, as a dream, I'd love to be startup Novartis in 5 years from now to some extent. It sounds a bit utopian to some extent, but how do we embed some pace? And to me, a major piece of this is really those rooms as well and those setups, is how do we work more with startups, with entrepreneurs who really want to change the world, who really have good visions, big aspirations. How do we recognize who is better than us in some places, and then it complements the strengths that we bring to the party as well.
Are you noticing culture conflict there with sort of a transformation taking place throughout your organization?
I wouldn't say conflict, but probably 50% of our job is probably a cultural transformation one way or the other. So how do we bring the 120,000 people that we have on board within the organization on that journey? And in some cases, it's more about how do we demystify what digital is all about? How do we really bring it to life? All the way to some basic trainings about what it really entails, to some areas where it's more about organizational design. How do we showcase, even take within NIBA, which is very digitally savvy or very data savvy. We have 6,000 scientists over there, but we have 250 data scientists, which is a good start, but often not fully embedded within the team. So how do we rethink the organization so that we can really merge our teams much more?
So do you notice the cultural need from the top down and bottom up, or how does that work when you look at 150,000 people around the world, different companies, different regions? Where is it all throughout that an organization needs to change when it's that large, or is it top down or bottom up?
Practically, where we started was, first we thought about the role, this role in particular, specifically before coming in. We moved quite a few teams across as well that were covering that were different entities within the organization. We moved them across. We started, so we've probably mobilized 1,500 people now across the organization around the digital agenda, so across the company itself. At the same time, we set up 12 what we call digital lighthouses. So those are 12 mega initiatives where we allocated the right funding as well, the right resources to go after those. And that has been quite hard work and took a lot of energy from us last year. And that's probably more from the top where, as an executive committee, we agreed on which ones are the ones that really matter. To finance those, what does it mean that is subscale that we are ready to close, which is never easy to do, but was absolutely necessary as part of that. How do those get owned by the management team, by the exec team as part of that? But then the rest is really the hearts and minds within the organization. And I have to say, the appetite has been incredible. To me, that has been one of the big surprises last year. The appetite to do this, I think under the impulse of us, under the impulse of setting up the tone that we're going big on data and digital, has been everywhere. It has been more about...
There's a hunger for it.
It's a huge hunger.
That's amazing. So the last 2 days, we've been talking all about this concept of thinking bigger, of health moonshots, and that's our whole mission here at Startup Health. How do you describe Novartis's moonshot? What's your impossible dream? How do you think about the future, and where do you all want to go?
I think we're positioning ourselves as reimagining medicine powered by data and digital, and this translates into different ways. It translates into, look at the moves we have made last year. We've closed some of or sold the GSK entity on over-the-counter, but to make massive bets and investment into new platforms. So we've made massive investment into Avexis, which is an incredible company, biotech company, 260 people that we bought for 8.7 billion. But it's really a technology platform at the core about SMA, kids less than 12 years old, at high risk of dying. Pretty much the current state of affairs is effectively them dying, but with the right treatment can effectively completely recover now. But this is really a platform. So it's the manufacturing of it, it's the AAV, it's all the methods that is behind. CAR-T, to me, is a technology play as well that is just incredible. It's personalized medicine at the extreme. When you look at the investment we have made into radioligand, for example, with Endocyte, with AAA, those are pretty impressive repositioning of the company that we have made on how do we really go along on some of those platforms that we can really own and on which we can truly bring transformational medicine to the world. And I would say if you take Avexis, for example, you cure babies. So it's babies who are about to die versus many of our medicine, quite frankly, are an improvement on a small subset of the population that is struggling with those. So I think that's the type of bet that we are willing to make.
And as you're thinking about these your moonshot to becoming a digital organization, how do you think about collaboration? How do you think about the best possible way to get there? Obviously, you've talked about some things you're investing in. Are you exploring other types of collaborations, unique collaborations that may be different than how legacy pharma companies have used to, have always operated?
Yeah, I come back to the point that partners are a key pillar of what we're doing. Beyond the lighthouses themselves, it's also how do we find the very best of the best that can help us drive a lot of things on which we're not necessarily the best as such. How do we open the pipeline? Are we credible within the ecosystem? That's why we opened the biome here in San Francisco 3 months ago. We're very grateful
We're so excited. Startup Health Village in San Francisco is at the biome, which is at 44 Montgomery, so we hope you all visit us there. It's an extraordinary space just a few blocks from here, and we're honored to be co-hosted there.
So all of you are welcome over there. I see some of the founders, Mo, Schwan, etc., and Robin are here in the room as well.
Actually, can you tell us all what the biome is and kind of the genesis, but really what the objective is?
Sure. The idea there was our customer is the startup, and a startup of somehow significant scales have already raised $40-50 million. So at different stage, but how do we make it attractive to work with us? We recognize it's not historically easy to work with pharma. There are many different entry points as well. We don't necessarily have champions with the organization to make it easy. So we spend a lot of time with startup understanding what are the needs. Many wanted to get much more access to data, so we've packaged all sort of sandboxes of data to make it easier to get after that. Some wanted to get access to clinical data and clinical settings as well, so that we could really speed up the way that they could experiment while working with us and prove the case as well together. In some cases, it's a 12-month program where we effectively have our champions helping them, very modular, depending on what they want to do as well as part of that.
Yeah, it's really cool. Over the last few months, I've met with different business units from Novartis. It was really cool to be at TechCrunch here in San Francisco and to see your Novartis team there meeting with tech startups. Right? We were recently in Argentina. There was a whole health innovation week. There was, I don't know, it seemed like 100 companies from around South America. How are you thinking about global innovation? How are you thinking about startups specifically as part of the solution for where you're trying to go?
So I think you're right. I think what you're doing here, I know you're thinking about extending that as globally as possible as well. It was great to do that together in Latin America. We're clearly thinking about where should we put different flags as well. In Asia in particular, Shanghai would probably be a natural one. Where in Europe should we set flag as well as part of that? That's why we're in Latin America together. Horses for courses as well. When you think about on data science, for example, Montreal being probably a center of the world, more and more from an AI point of view, there are some great collaborators over there. Is there something to be done? So we're exploring those. But it's more than the setup and the biome. It's also in those lighthouse, in those projects that we really want to scale. For example, we work with a company we're very proud of called Actana and another one called Shift. They really help us mine the 100,000 visits we do to doctors via our reps every single day to better educate us on how to go and which doctors to go, when to go them, and see them with the right type of content. So sort of reps powered by AI. If you look in decentralized trials, we work with Science 37, irrespective of the place, of how can we really go to patients much more than them having to come to our centers as part of that. Here in the US, we're working with Pair Therapeutics. I know you were talking about addiction earlier today. They have a great project called Reset and now Reset-O that we effectively launched yesterday for opioid addiction. So again, there is a recognition that those partners are really great at developing the right type of products. It's a different type of drugs. It's a virtual drug. We are probably good at helping them commercialize it. So how do we combine force to really go after that together?
And one of the biggest challenges that startups have is finding the right doorway into an organization as vast as Novartis. What is the right doorway? Obviously, you've invested in Startup Health, which has given us the opportunity to invite more companies into Startup Health Academy. You have the biome. You invest in companies. What would you recommend? What would your advice be to, there's a room full of entrepreneurs here. What's the right way to start a relationship with Novartis?
I think, first of all, I had an interesting question yesterday of having worked in retail for a long time and worked in healthcare. First of all, I would say if I had to make a choice right now, I would definitely, and I wanted to launch my own business, my own startup, I would go in healthcare without an hesitation. I think the space is ripe. The scale of the ambition of what you can do is absolutely incredible. The Moonshots probably bring that to life very nicely. How to work with us? I think that's what we are setting up indeed, the biome. But the one thing I would probably think about is what really matters to us. So what are the things that are on our path to scale? At the end of the day, we are a 200 billion market cap business. And we keep talking about it as a team as well, of how do we make it from 200 billion to 250? So how do we create 20 to 50 billion of market cap addition as well to that? If you think in those terms, you really need to move the dial in a significant way. So we are going to be focusing, for example, on the commercial side on 12 mega launches over the next 3 years. Study our launches, learn about those launches. We have big ones coming into migraine with Aimovig, we have big ones coming with RTH into ophthalmology. We have big franchises with Cosentyx and Entresto. So anything where we can help improve the launches over there, we'll have a lot of attention span within the organization for that. We have what are the pain points around those launches? For example, in psoriasis with Cosentyx, which is a major franchise for us, it still takes 9 years for patients to be diagnosed on the drug itself, on psoriasis. So how can you help us get patients realize their symptoms earlier? Many of the issues, we've talked a lot about adherence over the past few days, we're still struggling with 40, 50% non-adherence on that. How can you help us create something scalable that we can go after? If I take decentralized trials, the main problem statement we have is only 5% of eligible patients in oncology right now get access to trials. So we need entrepreneurs to help us think about how do you bring telemedicine sensors together that we all talk about to create experiences where we can really go and in which conditions we can go to patients as part of that. So my one advice would be really understanding the pain points that we currently have, where we struggle, where the center of energies really are, to come and really insert yourself into that. Because once you insert yourself into that, then there will be a lot of champions inside to really go and make that happen at scale. And then we can help you scale.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because oftentimes these early stage companies they're not going to move the dial on a $200 billion company. But you, with your background from Amazon during the early days, know that sometimes it just takes time and then pretty soon you're that $200 billion company. How do you think about integrating innovation in when it's almost too early and taking a risk before others maybe throughout the organization are willing to, and fostering an environment where that's possible? Is that something you're trying to infuse in the culture, or is it just not realistic?
We definitely are, and take each of the main project, and I see some of the leaders of some of those areas in there. We're really embedding some product owners properly. We're trying to properly work in an agile way. It's not as easy as if a startup wanted to do it, so we need help as well. Again, I'll take the Pear example. So the partnership with Pear is Corey and team have developed that incredible product in the context of substance abuse disorder, SUD, and for Reset-O in the case of opioid right now. So they have about 40 modules where the current standard of care right now is go to a psychoanalyst or a psychiatrist to go and help you on a 3-month program, having a visit every single month. So the product they came up with is 45 modules that when you have a craving, you're on the road, you can tap into your support network that is around, and you have modules that can really help you. First one to be FDA approved and getting twice the efficacy of the current standard of care. So the reason we bring them in is because we think they really have an incredible product. We can help them scale, so there's a natural fit in a space where broader than that, if it works, and it's a bet we're making, we can open up a broader digital therapeutic space, which is probably a $5 billion business that is behind. But it's not easy, and it creates a different culture because Pear is incredibly entrepreneurial, and they're pushing us all the time. Well, we don't necessarily have some of our centers that are ready, or reimbursement centers that are ready. They keep pushing us. They're sort of the adolescent pushing, and rightly so. We are Sandoz or Novartis, adults, saying, slow down, kids. We need, first of all, to have a reimbursement facility, to have the right payers on board, to have the right mechanism where we can prove the case. Let's make sure we get payment well approved in the proper setup. So there is a natural friction on that, but that friction is really healthy. It's really transformative inside because you see startup and scale starting to come together on that. So I cherish those, and I wish we could have more of those. And one point I'll add as well is we often consider pharma or big pharma as being slow or highly regulated. It's tough to move the dial, to make things happen. I keep coming back to the point that at least on the research and development side, where there's a lot of help we need as well, we spend, within Novartis alone, $10 billion per year on research. That's pretty much the biggest startup, one of the biggest startups on the planet when you think about it. For 10,000 experiments, we try for only one that works at the end of it. Now, where we need help is how can we find more startups that help us reduce the need to do 10,000 experiments and really can help bring it down much, much faster to the 500? How can we shrink the 12 years that it gets us to time to market? What are all the steps where it's way too manual? So that's where we are always looking for help on the path as well.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about your ask? If there's innovators out there, entrepreneurs out there, doctorpreneurs out there working on solutions, if you could wave a magic wand, what would more of them be working on that would help you?
I don't think that's a great question. I don't think it's just one, because we're covering, and that's what I love about what is happening in the space right now. It's probably more complex than retail. It goes across the entire value chain. But if I take on research, clearly, we're seeing many who are trying to really structure data so they can have hypothesis generation that are really shrunk down so that we can more faster go to the one that really matter and focus on those. I'd love to believe, personally, I'm absolutely convinced that drug hunting will become a computational challenge. And we're seeing many over the course of the 4 days, where some are really mind-blowing. It's a combination of engineering, science, data that is starting to come together with different type of profiles. So we need them. We have some who are really starting to put switches into DNA that you can activate based on a combination of the genomes and the proteins that with different type of combination depending on what happens there. That's very intriguing at least. So we're cherishing that space and we want to understand better. If you take clinical trials, that's still a bulk of our cost to get our drugs to market, highly sensitive, still highly regulated, but also highly manual. How can we improve patient recruitment? So we're looking there for big partners. Startup can be as big as a Google from that point of view. To startup will really understand where the patients are. How can we tap into them? How can we really bring them based on GRIP across investigation centers that we have? On the commercial side, I would go back to my point from earlier. How do you go more to the launches that we have to really understand the pain points around those launches? Because there we have a lot of appetite for that. So I could go on, and probably the last one is we're more and more intrigued as well by what I call the what ifs, so the more transformational models. So what happens when we don't get access to doctors anymore directly with our reps? What happens when patients really own their data directly? What happens, some are helping us think at the extreme of what happens if we had to reinvent Novartis from scratch. We call it zero-based pharma. Almost starting from scratch, what would be the asset that really mattered to us? So if you're a startup, how can you help us be much, much lighter from that point of view?
So we have an impossible dream at Startup Health, which is to improve the health and well-being of 7.5 billion people, everybody in the world. And it's crazy, right? But we believe that it's possible if we work together. We support thousands or tens of thousands of entrepreneurs, of innovators, get organizations like yours, investors around the world to all start collaborating, to all start investing, to all start working together to find solutions. And we think that we can solve the biggest challenges of our time. I guess my question for you would be, what advice would you have for Startup Health so that we can accomplish our impossible dream?
As you know, we cherish the partnership. I cannot dream of anything better than you being almost hosted within the biome as well. I think that really helps making sure that we are really connected at every single day, pretty much from that point of view. I think, again, I love the buzz. 2,500 people coming over the course of the 3-4 days, spending time upstairs. It's just incredible. You're connecting.
Magical up there.
It's magical. You're connecting something. There's an energy that is palpable everywhere. How do you scale? How do you bring that internationally as well? I think this is a model that has legs everywhere. It was the same when we were in Latin America together. It's same on the different recipe, but in China as well, in Asia in many ways. You see more and more countries at national level who really are putting the data and making it available. So that should make all this easier over time as well. So I think you're definitely doing your part. Keep pushing it, and we cherish that collaboration.
Well, let's do it together. I thank you for your partnership, and it's an honor to have you here at the Startup Health Festival. Thank you.
Thanks, Unity.